Continuing on with private eye literature, one writer who really made a career out of this genre and even managed to take it sort of into, I don't know if the domain of like traditional fiction applies, but managed to get people to read detective fiction who normally would never read detective fiction, was Ross Macdonald. Ross Macdonald wrote 20 books or so about a private eye named Lew Archer, also in California. California seems like it really has a monopoly on private eye literature. Anyway, roughly around the time that Raymond Chandler, who I talked about earlier, stopped writing Philip Marlowe stories, Ross Macdonald started writing the Lew Archer stories. And in the first few, the influence of Chandler and his detective character Philip Marlowe is just everywhere. The quips, the isolation, the determination to get to the truth, the stories where the detective interacts with a really wide variety of different kinds of characters, assembling his case. This is all right there. And then after a few of these, which they're fine, they're fun, the Lew Archer series really took a sort of a big step beyond Chandler. Because if there's one thing to about, like I said in the Chandler stuff, Chandler was not too concerned about plot, and he was not too concerned about things hanging together in a logical way, because his deeper concern was representing the detective as an investigator who was sort of seeking truth and justice in a difficult world, and he wanted the scenes to sort of have psychological reality. And this is probably part of why he was very successfully adapted into movies many times during his lifetime and after, is he focused on, scenes where characters interact and joust or become attracted to each other or what have you, and he didn't give too much concern to the broader story. But after a few of the Lew Archer novels that followed this pattern, Ross Macdonald really decided to restore the plot. He decided to keep sort of this well-drawn character of his private eye and the pattern of these sort of long investigations with multiple people, where you feel there are real stakes and where the murder happened to a real person that had real impact on other characters. It's not like a puppet show puzzle. But he also did plot better. He restored kind of the large scale, things fit together and who knows what when kind of elements, so that if you had sort of insight and paid very careful attention as a reader, you could, in theory, I'm not saying people did, but you could in theory sort of like put the pieces together as the book went on, so that the final revelation of whoever did the thing or was there when the thing happened would come as no shock. And his plots really, especially in the mid-60s when he's, after he practiced with this and really developed it, his plots are really next level, by modern standards too. Plotting in detective stories is honestly often kind of the weak point, and you're not expected to think too much about it, because you're just supposed to enjoy the detective sort of rolling around, interacting with people, noticing things, not noticing things. And if you sat down and actually thought through the actions that they took, you would, be appalled at how unrealistic much of it is. And in Macdonald's, though, he found ways to have the initial crime that draws the detective into the case be just, literally like tip of the iceberg. It's just the point at which some dark secret emerges into light, and Archer then spends the book sort of charting out what that secret is. Macdonald's books are if Chandler's books are something of like a sort of an urban hero, where the private detective's investigation is like their the story of their conflict with people who, for various reasons, don't want the truth to emerge. Macdonald goes like a step further, and there is usually some really bitter, dark secret that's at the center, that's actually driving events. Crimes are committed in books for, usually just a few reasons. Jealousy, greed, and the motives that are like kind of the ticking hearts of cases in Lew Archer's books are often the desire to protect a secret, a big one, something really dramatic that warrants a great deal of effort, and in the course of protecting it, the various other crimes, like the initial killing or attempted murder or what have you, is usually just a sort of a side effect of this darker secret. It's quite good. It takes in the next level of detective story, which is like, yes, to kill someone is a horrible thing, maybe the worst thing you can do, but in Macdonald's books, it's always clear that these things happen because of lies, because of the effort to obscure a truth, because somebody has been trying to keep something secret, sometimes for decades, and he really puts a laser focus, and Archer really comes to know this quite consciously, that the lie is as bad a crime against truth, the concept of truth, as a murder is a crime against a person and the society at large. And in some of his best books, the reveal of that secret is so well orchestrated, and he just pulls a bunch of these plot threads together into a single, wonderful moment of revelation. It's really some, pretty darn good writing for a commercial genre that doesn't usually demand anything like that level of attention to detail. They didn't have to sort of go down that road. The other interesting element of the Lew Archer stories is, by the mid-60s, I think he'd written about half of them that he would eventually write, and they'd won, gotten acclaim from the community, he'd won various awards, and he was doing all right with it. There was a movie based on the series, not any one particular book, I think, but just like the general Lew Archer series with Paul Newman as Archer, and that one did quite well, so he was freed, to do something different. And it's often interesting when you find a commercial artist or a commercial novelist, and they get to the point where they are going to be okay financially, whatever they do, relieved of that pressure to put into their art just what needs to be there in order for them to stay, financially successful. What do they want to do? And Macdonald wanted to do something that wound up being pretty interesting. He had Archer really go through a phase of self-reflection and self-criticism that was quite harsh. And he looked back on himself in the earlier books and how he acted like such a big shot, and he made all these jokes, and he was swanking around at these clubs, and he really regrets not focusing on his work. He regrets sort of like the elements of his life that were just all about sort of display and pride, and when he could have just, like anybody, Archer thinks he could have done better, even if what he did was okay. Maybe he could have helped people more if he'd simply been more focused. And so by the final Archer books, Archer almost disappears. We're still seeing events from his point of view, but he doesn't do any of those passages of reflection and criticism or even just observation. He's become almost like a disembodied voice, just going around doing the job, asking the questions, putting the pieces together, finding out who to talk to next, but without the quips, without the kind of the sort of the director's commentary that detectives often go through, where they come up to a house and it's like, the bungalow set by the sea, expensive. I guess such and such paid pretty well. There's none of that. He's just doing the job. He's like a guy who's been shaved down by life until just his basic goal, his basic function in life, to figure out the story, to find the truth, that's like all that's left of him by the last couple of books. And I don't, I you know it's fascinating. They're not the best books in the Archer series. I think he kind of pushed he took away the pleasure of inhabiting Archer's mind for his readers, and just sort of like put us, as Archer, just sort of ask these questions, waiting for replies, and so on and so forth. And I miss the parts where we were just kind of like in Archer's skin, reacting to things, feeling what he'd feel, and those more sort of traditional pleasures in the novel, where you just get to enjoy being another character. But it was also like, it felt fair that Archer might wind up there. It felt fair that over time Archer should change and grow. And just as around the halfway point of the series, he began to sort of take his work much more seriously, and to let himself be more affected by the events of the books. It felt that, yes, this might be one place that if someone like Archer was really out there, that they might wind up. They might wind up just sort of like, I don't need any of these other things that used to come along with the job. I'm just going to do my job, which is, to ask questions, to talk to people, to think about how things work, and to put it all together. It was a very interesting shift. Series fiction often has there does need to be some, they can't just completely repeat book after book after book. Even a successful series usually needs to give some little dazzlement on the formula, some little changes, some little twists. And this one had the Lew Archer series has this really interesting arc right out of Chandler into its own mature sense of itself, with the more complicated sense of the problems of lies and secrets that the main character has to interact with, and then eventually just sort of like fading away until Archer's just almost transparent, and all that's left is just the impulse to discover the truth of what happened. It's pretty neat. Taken as a whole, it has a pretty powerful sense of kind of what the fundamental appeal of detection is, and that just sense that like there is a sublime value to finding truth. That truth is findable, that it needs persistence and work and constant adjustment, but that truth is findable, and searching for it is valuable. By the end, it's not like Archer needs to make long cases for himself about why he's doing this. He can assume that the reader agrees with his modus operandi, this fundamental sense that the hows and whys of a crime need to be uncovered. It's just essential.